morning. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to introduce three fantastic humans to you this morning. Dr. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Huffman is a nurse by background with experience in critical care, emergency, and trauma nursing, who has deployed several times as a trauma nurse before becoming an ACMT critical care specialist. And then she went back to school, receiving her PhD in 2017, before she returned to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where she is working in resilience, research, and retention. She is currently studying ways to help en route casualty care teams better navigate things like catastrophic injuries and to foster resilience in these high-stress positions. Thank you, Dr. Huffman, for being here. Our next panelist is Dr. Daniel Sofratti. He is the founder and CEO of Aptima. He was once an aerospace engineer, and he now spends his time solving complex problems that require interdisciplinary solutions. For 20 years, Aptima has focused on human performance engineering, from learning to decision-making to teamwork to organizational behavior, blending scientific methods with the study of human work. Daniel was driven to this work by his curiosity, not only how the aircraft works, but how the pilot interacts with the airplane. Recently, his passion and curiosity has taken him into the worlds of precision learning and how to leverage human and AI systems. Thank you, Daniel, for being here with us today. And our next panelist is Dr. Caitlin Bohere, who has been practicing as an infectious disease specialist in the Dayton area since completing her fellowship with Wright State University in 2015. She serves as the Infectious Disease Fellowship Program Director and Assistant Professor of Medicine with Wright State University. She also practices with Wright State Physicians Infectious Disease Department, where she serves patients at Miami Valley Hospital. She enjoys studying all aspects of infectious diseases, including the more rare infections such as zoonosis, a disease that can be transmitted from animals to humans. And she has a special interest in orthopedic infections. Thank you, panelists, for being here today. If we have giving you a round of applause. So let's dive right in. I'd like to start with the question about, tell us about a technology partnership project involving multiple teams, multiple specialties, and tell me about how that partnership worked. Who would like to kick us off? Sarah, we can't hear you.
I apologize. I was on mute, so I didn't skew the other folks speaking. So I can start if that's okay. One of the projects that I think of in particular is the CCAT Communication and Coordination Study that I have been working on for about a little over a year now, and looking at how the critical care air transport teams communicate and how they coordinate to provide care in that austere environment that is the back of a plane, where they have difficulty speaking to each other and how they interact. So how that evolved was, we have research psychologist. I work with a research psychologist. I work with the data analysis comes from someone at Ohio State University, which is in academia. And then we also used, which I thought was really an interesting thing, was using one of our language learning labs in order to do our transcription work. And so that gives that lab an opportunity to expand what they do with their language learning and learning a new language, which is a medical language, because honestly, we do have a language. And so it trained that capability to learn a new language. But it also brought together our ability to interpret data by using Ohio State, because the data, you have to look at both the trends, biophysical trends in these simulation trainings, and you also have to look at the transcript of what did they do, what did they say, how did they communicate, and then what was the result on the simulated patient, and looking at the trends. So Ohio State had the data analysis to assist us in identifying those points from biophysical markers. And then, of course, the research psychologist in looking at how we are as humans in interacting and communicating and how we can make that teamwork more effective, and especially how we can address those barriers that occur in those austere environments within a medical team. So that's, if that's satisfactory, I have others, but that's one that I like a lot. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to pick up also on what Sarah just said. I think a lot of the projects we work on, especially with the Air Force and the Air Force Research Labs in particular, involve indeed the interdisciplinary approaches. Not just because it's fun, but also because, as Dr. Naik just reminded us, a lot of innovation occurs in the scenes, occurs in between disciplines or during a dialogue between two disciplines. I can think of one particular project that eventually started as an R&D project in a lab at AFRL, in which we studied how we can capture all kind of neurophysiological signals from the operator. It is not a medical project, but it is a human performance and safety project. And eventually turn that using data analytics and artificial intelligence to assess the state of the operator, whether they are stressed, whether they are engaged, whether they are under high workload, and then even close the loop further by saying, in that area, the person is about to make a mistake. Let's augment her or him with technology, an augmentation technology or an AI-based technology. And you can imagine a project like that that occur in a lab at the AFRL, RHC, for those who like letters and acronym, that was called the Human Lab. So you have a team of performers there that we supported. And eventually, I want to make 2 points here. One of them is that in order for interdisciplinary work to work, you need to have empathy. Mm-hmm. You need to have empathy for the other side, because it's not just a team, it's a team of teams. And those successes, which are not, occur from time to time, the magic happens then, happen when a government team and an industry team can work together. It's not just who contracts the other, it's also having thought partners. And we were very lucky in that particular project to have two great thoughts partners at the Air Force Research Lab, Dr. Golster and then Dr. Christensen, that really accompanied us and understood us from an industry perspective, as well as we understood them in their world, in the government side of things, understanding both the possibilities, but also the constraints. The story continues several years later. I'll tell you that later, but basically it has a very good ending, that technology eventually led to a very fast transition from R&D to the field, and now even a new company, a new corporation that is dedicated to the fielding and the implementation of that technology that was born in some lab somewhere at Right Path into the larger market. And that's phenomenal.
Can I just add one thing into what, Daniel, your comments? So with the communication and with your work also that you're discussing right now, safety is a priority both for the operator and for the patient. And communication is one of those, number one, we know that's the number one contribution to errors in medical care. So safety is always the primary goal when it comes to the patients and it comes to the operators both. So I really appreciate that.
Those accounts. I recently came from the VA Medical Center here in Dayton. I was there employed full-time for about 1.5 years. But while I was there, a lot of interdisciplinary kind of care and coordination, a lot of projects going on. So one of the, I think, most applicable projects to this discussion is Antibiotic Stewardship, our program, as well as building in electronic order sets as our kind of technology component to that. Not only order sets to drive use of certain antibiotics for the appropriate indication, which actually I think can be helpful to providers instead of constraining, although they may feel it's constraining, but then when we see the other options that are more appropriate, then I think that it's actually a helpful thing for them. Also, in addition to the order sets, creating just a simple technology and writing a note from our antibiotic stewardship program about certain antibiotic recommendations based on a simple chart review. So some of those, it was actually a formal project involving a carbapenem, meropenem specifically, to kind of make the use of meropenem more appropriate. And we actually were really successful in reducing our inappropriate meropenem use, which was awesome. But I think that, yes, definitely the empathy is huge, because people, I mean, it's easy to kind of offend people by saying, well, we really don't want you to use that antibiotic, but I think when you give them the reasons why, and technology is so nice with, I mean, obviously it has its barriers, but I think overall it's improved communication and flow with work.
I have to add something to that too. I'm sorry, it'll be quick, I promise. So one, we did learn that we need that antibiotic stewardship both in our deployed locations, because as you probably are aware with your veteran work, we have a lot of odd bacterias, and we brought some bacterias with us, and we needed to really get onto the stewardship of the antibiotics. So it has an application certainly in our deployed environments. So that role is very important in how we move forward. We don't know what environments we're going to be in and what kind of stewardship we need, but it's a huge piece of this puzzle. So much appreciate it.
Dr. Huffman, at no point apologize for bringing the conversation forward. I love this. We're talking about communication and partnership, and
yes.
About sharing our expertise across those lines through those themes. So
right.
this is the power of that. So thank you.
Right. She's talking about expanding a capability too of a provider in how they can manage those antibiotics. We may not have an infectious disease specialty wherever we are, but we can certainly use technology to be able to reach back either to an expert or reach into an algorithm or some other to select the correct antibiotic. So it's also talking about people shouldn't be offended as it expands their capabilities. If we have one doc and we need 10, we can expand the capability there, or we don't have a specialty.
That's a great transition actually into the next question, which is, what do you see as the future of patient care in crisis situations, and what kind of partnerships and or technology would get us there faster?
Do you want me to go?
Yes, please.
So I think we saw somewhat in COVID some future issues that we have already. We have some healthcare deserts. We talk about food deserts, and we know that COVID disproportionately affected some communities and some socioeconomic levels. So there's like a healthcare desert that exists, and how can we address and reach out to those communities through using AI or technology, or how can we address those communities that fit within that? We also have the issue in the military. We kind of have been working with this for a while, the idea of resilience, and how do we have these healthcare providers go again and again and again and be exposed to things like catastrophic injuries. Well, now we see in COVID where we have places like New York and Seattle where we have healthcare workers who are exposed every day to a very difficult situation, making very difficult decisions, and that's a limited resource. So at future burnout, future numbers of healthcare, and how can we expand healthcare by using technology? We know already we were limited in our resources with healthcare to start with. We just it wasn't so critical until it actually happened in a pandemic that we saw the results of that and what we might need to approach. And it may be a little silver lining in that we're now really starting to use some technologies that we knew were there and we could have used, but we weren't optimizing. So now optimize that opportunity to use technology and address these patient needs, perhaps keep them out of the hospitals where we used to admit them, we can now maybe use biosensors. We can use remote ways of monitoring them and keep like a heart failure patient out of the hospital and not exposed to the pandemic or exposed to get sick and possibly die. Those vulnerable patients we keep out, and we're able to monitor some of those that we would have to admit, but we can now keep them at home. So I see lots of utility coming out of the technology we can use to monitor patients in their home setting and keep them safe and well. So, and expand our capabilities as far as limited providers or limited nurses, limited doctors, limited respiratory therapists.
Totally agree. Thank you for kicking that off. Many great points there. This is such a challenging time with COVID, and it's been interesting. So I was at the Dayton VA when the pandemic started in March, and now being at an 800-bed private or public hospital, rather, totally different experiences. Both of them struggled at times with limited resources, limited healthcare workers, and we've definitely used technology to our benefit. For example, with outpatients for prevention of COVID, we've kept, our veterans trying to do as many telemedicine visits as possible. So actually, I think serendipitously what we found was this actually worked better for physicians, nurses, and patients. And it's kind of interesting that kind of a negative thing pushed us to be innovative and kind of stumble upon some things that we might not have done without that trigger. This is very interesting. And I think it's definitely going to change our practice for healthcare methods with using technology more forever. I don't think we're ever going to go back, because I think that'd be going in the wrong direction. So that's good. Also with inpatients, we've used, video, audio. I think we're realizing that, 5 physicians a day from different specialties may not actually need to go in every single day and use that PPE. So I think kind of, choosing who to see and how frequent to see is important. Here at Miami Valley, large hospital, interesting, just last night I was thinking, I rounded on 26 patients in the COVID unit, and, it's like, my God, what were we doing before COVID? Because my ID patients the census is the same, but somehow I think with technology and our ability to chart review really rapidly, it's working.
And I would add to that the ability to not have to go in those rooms all the time and use that technology to monitor somewhat. And I hear Daniel apologize.
No. I am. I'm terribly humbled to be surrounded by a nurse and a physician here with Sarah and Caitlin. I am just a lowly engineer.
No, we need you.
No.
But I need you to pick up on a point that Caitlin made, which is the notion that there is a silver lining in this terrible crisis we're undergoing, in a sense that COVID-19 crystallized the gaps and the unmet needs more so than many years of research would have done, unfortunately. And on the other hand, it's good for our community because it focuses the technology development for a purpose, as opposed to just for the sake of technology development. A little story I wanted to share here is that we had my team, my company and I developed a tool in collaboration with one of the Harvard hospital here, Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, a couple of years ago, called the MyNICU. NICU as in neonatal intensive care units. And that was a tool basically that is like an iPad that is a communication tool in which there is real-time information about the premise, the new babies, that the parents can follow, the doctors have access to, the updated situation, state of the baby is there all the time. And so that provides basically an interpreter in a way that makes the discussion between the anxious parents, as you can imagine, and the physician much easier because they know what question to ask. And the physician is also happy because she or he knows how to focus on really the important stuff. And so that tool, it turns out during COVID-19 had an explosion of use because the parents couldn't get into the hospital because of safety concerns to visit their babies. And the only link they had to the state of their baby was that technology. That was a pretty smart and elegant technology, but it's not, extraordinary, but it was extraordinarily useful because suddenly we had established the connection between the parents, the families, the patient, and the physician and the nurses in the hospital. And I think that has to do also with this notion of shifting the center of gravity of care, not exclusively on the physician and the nurse, but also on the parents and the family. And I think that's one thing we learned during this crisis. Wanted to share my medical story, but
no, I love it. You know what I'm going to say?
What would you say?
Because my passion is the social and the social and the cultural and the spiritual piece of that we have to bring in and ways of thinking when we look at families and we look at patients. I think we've seen that also with COVID and how important that is. So that's, my passion is that psychosocial and that cultural aspect of it, to bring that in with those families and address their care in that way. And COVID brought that forward to us also. So that's my passion, what you're talking about. So you can do that both, I think, using IT or using AI, but you can also do it. We have to bring our human components into it because science is inductive and deductive. And we have to have these ways of thinking and these diversities and ways of thinking in order to come with a better solution to a problem.
Totally agree. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take a moment here and let the audience know that they also can ask questions. So you can go ahead and submit questions. I'll get them here and ask them to the panelists. So I'm going to just take a moment and see if we've got some questions here for our panel this morning. Okay, I do have one question, and it is, who would be a good person to discuss innovation for remote patient monitoring?
So I think when you say a good person, I would say which team? Who do we want on that team and what disciplines and what backgrounds and what? It has to be interdisciplinary. It can't be one good person. So there is the engineering component that is huge, of course, because you're building something that's going to transport a patient. But you're also have to look at the medical components from the physician, the nurses, the biological components of the human body, plus the psychological, the holistic perspective of the human, because you're transporting a human. So it's not just that we're building a machine. We're building a machine to extract humans. And so you have to put the human component in it. So I would say you have to look for team members and interdisciplinary teams. And I think we do need academia for that conceptual piece, the theoretical piece, and the brain trust that we have in the different disciplines we have that exist in our universities. We have to have our engineers and we have to have our folks who are working in technology. And then we have to have our healthcare personnel and those different types of approaching a problem, making sure we're asking the question and we are doing the first step of the scientific process and observing and seeing what the phenomena is and then finding the answer, not trying to fit the answer to the problem, but what is the problem and then find the answer. So I would say it's a team. I would say it's not an individual. There might be an individual who leads that versus another individual, but I would say it's a team, multidisciplinary all the way.
I think that's right on theme with what we've been talking about this morning, right? The importance of those partnerships in solving these difficult problems in order to find workable solutions. Call out again to the audience. If anyone has questions, please go ahead and submit those. But in the meantime, I'd like to ask the question, how do we, so all three of you we're talking about COVID being this catalyst, right? So how do we build on the opportunities that are available right now? And how do we partner across the aisle to take advantage of this speeding up, right? To find other solutions that are, to quote Daniel, extraordinarily useful.
It's a day-by-day process. We are learning so quickly, and literally, not just clinically, but academically too. We're realizing that even our, teaching styles have changed, and gosh, even medical students are a different story than residents versus fellows. Even so, we're treating everyone differently than we used to, and I think that there's just learning to be had every minute of every day. Even logistical issues like how many people can I fit in my office to do a lecture? And then we have the online lectures that we've transitioned almost every learning activity to online if it involves more than a few people, or even people at multiple sites. So what we've actually found, like similar to the clinical care, is the academics are easier to include multiple people from different specialties or different sites in town because they just have to hop on Zoom, for example. So I think that, those types of things we're going to grab onto and just take off and use forever. Again, it's hard to imagine. Maybe one day we will go back and have people drive across town to come to our academic lectures, but I think we're going to really transform here. We already are. It's hard. We don't want to transform too fast either, because I think then, you kind of get ungrounded. Clinically, definitely, there's probably avenue to tap into to even be more efficient than we already are using technology.
Yeah.
I see video maybe being a better option, more available. We don't really have video in every room where a physician could just video call the patient. I think that would be huge, just to get some basic information, and even just a glance at them can really give you a lot of information.
Yeah, I support totally what Caitlin said. I think that we are just scratching the surface, but at the same time, some of us are contrarian. We don't want the needle to go too much to the other side.
Right.
We are trying to see really how to meet what we perceive to be the current and near future needs, but without throwing the baby with the bathwater, so to speak.
Right.
And I see at least two major transformation. One, I would reinforce what Caitlin said in terms of the education and training component of what we do. We are learning very fast what can scale up and what cannot scale up in terms of distance learning or distance training. The Air Force is very much espouse the concept of live, virtual, and constructive, for example, environment for training. And how do you do that when you are not there, when you are not in the simulation center? Could you use augmented reality or some other techniques like that, or virtual reality, to position the pilot into the cockpit, even if he's working at home? That's a revolution in terms of training and what kind of skills you are not going to be able to measure and to hit. The other application beside the learning and and way beyond the classroom, what that makes it interesting, is also the notion of remote monitoring. And you asked that question, Bridget, earlier. I think a lot of the technology that we're using right now, and the technology I talked at the beginning of the panel, this notion of measuring the cognitive and mental state of say a worker working in a hazardous environment, and monitoring her or his safety. The very same technology could be used for population monitoring, and that brings basically about their health. I mean, you can multiply that by 10,000 or by 100,000. And with that come a slew of other problems of privacy of data and the data that travel through all these networks, etc. So as we solve one problem, we probably uncover 10 more, which will keep us in business for a long time.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, we do have a couple more questions that have come through. And so two of them are similar. They're related to how do I partner to bring technologies to warfighters? So two different questions about involvement. One specifically a technology company that provides thermal dressings and cooling dressings, another who specializes in infectious disease. How does somebody in industry who seeks partnership, who's working on a specific solution, how do they go about partnering in order to bring these technologies to warfighters?
Okay, your question is from industry to healthcare providers or whoever that person is it, or is it the opposite way? Is it from?
So
how do the technology experts partner with the military or partner with?
Let's answer the question in both directions. So if the questions are along the lines of, if I'm a private company and I have solutions and I want to partner on how to utilize the solutions I've developed for the warfighters, how would I go about that? And additionally, how would the military then go about partnering with private companies to address things like infectious disease prevention, for example?
So for one direction, I think Daniel might have some thoughts on the direction from the, am I not correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So let me let you do that and see what you have to say there.
And so I think it depends. If that particular business is not, has not done business with the government before, there are a few avenues for that. In particular now, and the Air Force is leading the way, especially if the business is a small business. There is a new initiative by that comes from the headquarters of the Air Force all the way to FRL, called AFWERX, WERX, AFWERX, which is a new way by which the Air Force is reaching what they call non-traditionals. There are people like that are not typical defense contractors that have solutions for a problem that the Air Force, and there are all kinds of forums, and the FRL in particular has been the designated authority to host this FWERX initiative. So I would urge the person to take a look at those, just Google it, and there are all kinds of forums in which the government is making things very easy to contract those companies. They don't have to have all the traditional for. The other way, which is a way, is to ask questions and to find a champion inside. And that's really the more personal way. I found that our best successes in the past is when we had one person, and you ask, you don't find them in the yellow pages, you just ask, and eventually you pull a thread and you find the one champion that understands your solution, with whom you can engage. And we talked about partnership that can become your thought partner, not just the person who signed the checks. It's very important to understand that. The checks is the easy part. Having a thought partner, a person who can really promote and ask you the hard question and partner with you, is key. And there are many, we are blessed with having many of these folks, say even at Right Path. So I would urge that person to start picking up the phone and pulling the thread. And maybe today they can make some of those contacts in this workshop.
So I have to add on to that, if I may. So I love that you spoke to the how to get the business part, because that's certainly not my area of expertise. What I do love, though, is social networking, and what you said, to reach out and ask. You look at somebody's work and you find someone out there who does a type of work, you contact them. A lot of times they'll have their contact available, and you say, this is what I'm working on, this is what I'm thinking about, can I speak with you, da, da, da. And so I build networks. So I build networks of different disciplines, different ways of thinking, different people, and what might fill the places where I have a deficit. And so that's like building social capital and building a way to have these partners that understand things you don't understand. I like the idea of the thought partner, because I think that when we say thought partner, I wouldn't mean, and I don't think you mean in particular, that you have somebody who thinks just like you. You have somebody who can check and balance you. So you have somebody, we all have our biases. And one of the things we like to do is we know the answer and we're going after that answer because that's our bias. And so if you have people from different disciplines, people from different ways of thinking, they will check you on your biases. And they will check you on the logic of your thought processes. And so that's what I love about my network and reaching out to the people who have that ability to say, okay, slow down. You're going in a direction that you are biased towards, and this is why I think. And so they really challenge me in the way I think and help me to think in different ways. And within the network, you have those weak ties, or you reach out to people and you build the social capital, but you also find the new and novel information and knowledge. I don't find novel, new information and knowledge within my own little small circle. If I sat with nurses all day, we're gonna talk about the same thing. I might just as well talk to myself. I will get the same answer eventually. But if I talk to people all across different disciplines and I have a network, I reach out to all these different ways of thinking, have a thought partner, then I can be challenged to think in a different way. And that's where you get your novel approaches and your novel new information. So that's my social network analysis of that, of how I go about my life that way, my life and professional and personal. It's nice. It's a human connection.
Mm-hmm.
So to that end, we only have about 3 minutes left. I'd like to ask each of you how people watching this panel who may seek to ask you specifically questions or are interested in maybe becoming thought partners, how they can get in touch with you. So maybe if we go around and just share how people listening today can get in touch with you. We also have some questions that we didn't get to, so maybe we could send those to you afterwards. And again, we only have 3 minutes, so briefly, how people can get in touch with, and maybe even real quickly, like the types of thought partners you're currently seeking.
Okay, so go ahead. Let Kathleen go.
Yes. So I think the easiest way for contact is my Wright State email. If you have questions or want to link up as a thought partner. So it's Caitlin, Katelyn .Boher, Booher @wright.edu.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Thanks.
So my email, probably my work email, is the best route to start with. So it's sarah.l.huffman, HUFFMAN, .meal@mail.mil. And I'm happy to, I'm a very curious person, and I need that fed. So that's how I get the novel knowledge. So I'm not limited so much in who I want to partner with. Sometimes I know for specific projects, but I enjoy the conversation. I enjoy the thought sharing. So multiple different disciplines and backgrounds.
Thank you.
Well, I know now. Thanks. I will make the contact with Caitlin and Sarah myself. So thank you.
And I would appreciate that contact with both of you also.
My email is my last name. That's on the screen. Sofratti, SERFATY @aptima.com. That's the name of the company, APTIMA. And and they can contact me like that. They can also contact, for folks who are in the Dayton area, Aptima has a pretty significant office just across from Wright State, actually, and from Wright Pat. So if I can direct you to some of my scientists and engineers that may be more appropriate to answer your question. But hey, we are hiring, so anybody who doesn't need just to be a thought partner, but also a colleague, we're listening.
I love it. Thank you so much. We are out of time. I want to thank each of you for being a part of this panel and sharing your expertise with us this morning. For those of you that are watching and tuning in, stay with us. There are amazing people all day today. We've got 3 more panel conversations. We've got some fabulous speakers. And you were just offered the opportunity to partner with 3 amazing humans. And so if you something that you listened to today resonated with you, reach out and start a conversation.